In the Fallout universe, Vault-Tec promised to build 1,000 underground shelters to protect Americans from nuclear annihilation. These vaults were sold as humanity's last hope, safe havens where civilization could wait out the apocalypse and eventually rebuild. But the thing is, original Fallout creator Tim Cain recently shared a theory that changes everything we thought we knew about these vaults, and spoiler alert, it's pretty disturbing. So Vault-Tec secured a massive government contract to construct 1,000 vaults across America. 1,000. That's enough to save a significant chunk of the population, right? Well, according to Tim Cain, Vault-Tec likely built far fewer than half of what they promised. Some Fallout games even show vaults still under construction when the bombs fell in 2077, which suggests that they were nowhere near completion. But Cain's theory goes deeper than just corporate incompetence. He believes Vault-Tec deliberately underbid for the government contract, knowing full well they couldn't deliver. They took the money, started building, and then realized, or perhaps always knew, that completing 1,000 functioning vaults was impossible. And once that reality set in, something shifted. If they couldn't save enough people to actually preserve civilization, then saving people clearly wasn't the goal anymore. So what if they did something else instead? That's when the experiments began. And trust me, what came next makes typical corporate greed look tame by comparison. Now, if you're thinking this is getting dark, well, you're absolutely right. And if you want to hear more twisted Fallout lore, hit that subscribe button because things are about to get even more sinister. The vaults we encountered throughout the Fallout games are famous for their absolutely deranged experiment. Vault 108 was populated entirely by aggressive clones, all named Gary. Just Gary. Hundreds of them. Vault 75 separated children from their families and subjected them to brutal conditioning programs, essentially turning kids into test subjects. Vault 87 exposed residents to the forced evolutionary virus, creating the Super Mutants that plagued the wasteland. And Vault 112 trapped people inside a virtual reality simulation controlled by a scientist who'd gone completely mad. These weren't accidents or isolated incidents of things going wrong. These were deliberate, planned experiments. Vault-Tec transformed what should have been shelters into laboratories, using the people who trusted them as guinea pigs. And according to Cain's theory, this pivot to experimentation happened because Vault-Tec knew they had failed to build enough vaults. If they couldn't save humanity, they'd study it instead. The most disturbing part is that Vault-Tec employees documented everything meticulously. They tracked results, compared data across vaults, and treated human suffering as research material. These weren't rogue scientists going off script. This was corporate policy, sanctioned from the top down. The recent Fallout TV series added another horrifying layer to this theory. The show revealed that Vault-Tec didn't just fail to prevent the nuclear war, they actively caused it. Vault-Tec fired the first shot. They literally sold the end of the world, creating the very catastrophe they claimed to protect people from. It's the ultimate scam, really. Convince everyone that nuclear war is coming, sell them overpriced shelter spots, then make absolutely certain that war happens so you can cash in on the panic you created. In the show, we see how Vault 31, 32, and 33 operated as a connected experiment designed by a Vault-Tec employee named Bud Askins. These vaults had a specific purpose: to preserve Vault-Tec's influence for centuries by cryogenically freezing the company's managers and periodically thawing them out to supervise regular vault dwellers. The inhabitants of Vault 32 and 33 were essentially breeding stock, meant to produce offspring with the managerial traits Vault-Tec valued. When things looked bad, vault dwellers were manipulated to vote for someone from Vault 31, ensuring Vault-Tec maintained control generation after generation. Which, might I add, is rather fitting considering the company's entire business model was built on manipulation and control from day one. Fallout Season 2 introduced us to Vault 24, and what was discovered inside is genuinely chilling. Americans were being brainwashed to become communists. Yes, you heard that right. In a world where communism was framed as the enemy that caused nuclear war, Vault-Tec was secretly creating communist sleeper agents inside one of their own vaults. The theory behind this experiment is almost elegant in its cynicism. Vault-Tec's entire business thrived on fear, specifically fear of communism and nuclear war. So what happens when the war ends and people start rebuilding? How does Vault-Tec continue making money in a post-apocalyptic world? Simple. You create the next threat yourself. The brainwashed residents of Vault 24 would emerge on Reclamation Day, looking like regular patriotic Americans helping to rebuild their country. They'd integrate into the new society, completely hidden in plain sight. Then, whenever Vault-Tec decided the time was right, these sleeper agents or their descendants would be activated. Chaos would follow, whispers of communist infiltration would spread, and suddenly, Vault-Tec would be back in business, selling solutions to problems they created themselves, and the cycle begins again. Thankfully, the Vault-24 experiment appears to have failed, though that doesn't mean that Vault-Tec's post-war money-making scheme is completely dead. What makes Cain's theory so disturbing is that when you really sit with it, if Vault-Tec only built a few hundred vaults instead of 1,000, and each vault held maybe 1,000 people at most, then we're talking about saving a few 100,000 people at best. In a country with hundreds of millions of citizens, that's essentially nothing. The vast majority of Americans who paid for vault spots, who trusted Vault-Tec to protect them, never had a chance. And the ones who did make it into the vaults, well, they faced horrific experiments instead of safety. Some were exposed to psychoactive drugs like in Vault 106. Others were forced into human sacrifice scenarios like Vault 11, where residents had to sacrifice one person annually or everyone would die, except the vault systems were lying the whole time. Even the vaults that seemed successful, like Vault 81, were designed with sinister purposes that residents had to actively resist. You start to realize that when you play Fallout, you're not just exploring a post-nuclear wasteland, you're witnessing the aftermath of one of the most comprehensive betrayals in fiction. Every skeleton you find, every abandoned vault you explore, every failed experiment you uncover, it's all evidence of a company that commodified survival and then failed to deliver on even that. Cain's theory fundamentally changes how we view the entire Fallout universe. The reason the wasteland seems so impossibly bleak, the reason that civilization never quite recovers even centuries after the bomb fell, isn't just because of radiation or violence. It's because humanity's best chance at survival was sabotaged from the start. The people who should have been rebuilding society were instead scattered across a handful of experimental vaults, subjected to psychological torture, genetic manipulation, and social experiments that broke them. Meanwhile, the surface world was left to fend for itself, with only a tiny fraction of the population surviving in places like Shady Sands, which ironically was founded by residents of Vault 15. Communities that managed to thrive despite Vault-Tec's failures rather than because of their help. And in the TV show, we see how Vault-Tec's influence persists even after the war. Hank McLean, a Vault 31 manager, literally nuked Shady Sands, the capital of the new California Republic, because he viewed it as an obstacle to Vault-Tec's vision for the future. The surface world was rebuilding, proving they didn't need Vault-Tec, and that couldn't be allowed to stand. It raises an uncomfortable question. How many other settlements across the wasteland were destroyed, not by raiders or mutants, but by Vault-Tec operatives eliminating competition? So when you put up your next Fallout game, whether it's Fallout 3, New Vegas, 4, or 76, remember this. You're probably one of the last things representing pre-war life in America, not because the nuclear war was so devastating that nobody could survive, but because the company tasked with preserving humanity chose profit and control over salvation. Every vault you explore is a testament to Vault-Tec's betrayal. Every experiment you uncover is evidence of their contempt for the people who trusted them. And every survivor you meet in the wastelands exists despite Vault-Tec's best efforts, not because of them. The vaults weren't shelters, they were tombs, laboratories, and prisons dressed up as salvation, and Vault-Tec made sure of it from the very beginning. If this theory gave you the same existential dread it gave me, go ahead and smash that like button, and subscribe for more deep dives, because trust me, we've only scratched the surface of how messed up this universe really is. I'll see you in the next one.